let's talk about the due on sale clause here because this is something that is probably the most commonly brought up topic that scares new investors. They're like, oh my gosh, what if they call the due on sale clause? What if, a tsunami and a hurricane hits me at the same time? Like they don't even, and here's the thing is, even if it was called, they don't even realize what really is actually going to happen. And a lot of times these houses have equity and they just have to take their profit now instead of later. So let's talk about like what the due on sale clause is, how often they can expect this to happen, what could get this to be triggered to happen. And then maybe we'll talk in, you're really good at explaining how the insurance process works because
Right.
that can keep, that could be a flag for this as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, due on sale clause, in short, what due on sale clause says is that if you sell your property, and this is in, by the way, this is in like every deed of trust. That's every mortgage that you're going to deal with. It's really like 98% of them, but we're just going to say every one of them because just be prepared for it. But the due on sale clause is in all of these deeds of trusts. And what it says is if the owner sells the property, the bank has the option to ask for the rest of the mortgage to be due. Whatever that due and owing amount is, the bank has the right to ask for that to happen. Okay. When it sells, they have the option to call it due. Right. So what we're doing absolutely triggers the due on sale clause. Subject to absolutely triggers the due on sale clause. But you'll notice I'm using the phrase triggers instead of violates, because a lot of people, one of the things that they say is, oh, well, you're violating the due on sale clause. You're making it's not a violation. It's a trigger. There is a term in the deed of trust that says, if you sell any part hereinafter of any blah, 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 lots of legalese. If you sell any part of your interest in this property, the bank has the option, but not the obligation, to ask for that loan to be called due. Okay. That's what the due on sale clause is. So yes, we are triggering it. It does not say, do not sell this house or else we will call the due on sale clause. Right. Then we would be violating it, right? So subtle difference, but important. Due on sale clause, and I'm partners with Scott Horn. We've got a decent sized portfolio together, and that's one of the things that I partnered up with him a while back on these things. So calling on his experience of the last 30 years he's been in this business, as well as the experiences that I've seen in the houses that I've done. I myself, I've originated over $75 million worth of owner financed mortgages, $100,000 at a time. We've seen about 15,000 owner financed mortgages go through this office, and we've seen fewer than 10 due on sale clauses ever get called.
Wow.
The likelihood of that due on sale clause being called in the real world is very slim. But the reason it's going to get called is because you screwed up and you did your insurance wrong.
Right.
That's typically going to be the reason why it gets called. And just by the way, I want to be very clear, the bank has every right to call that due on sale clause just because they want to, right? Because the person has sold the house to you, the bank has every right to call that due on sale clause. So you have to be very clear in disclosing that to your seller, and you have to be very clear in disclosing that to your subsequent buyer if you're going to sell it with owner financing or anything along those lines. We need to make sure that everybody's disclosed, everybody understands what's going on, even though it's not super likely, it could happen. To answer your question about the insurance, you're absolutely right. Insurance is the big reason, because what's going to happen is the bank is going to get a new insurance policy turned into their escrow account, and they're going to see the wrong information on it, and they're going to say, whoa, what's going on with this deal? And you've put it right in front of them and you've made it too obvious, and now they have to, their hands are kind of tied, and they're like, well, we have to, Right. So to answer the question of how insurance is supposed to look, you need to have some very specific things put on there. Okay, so you've got your seller that sold you the property. That seller's name has to be on the insurance policy. What's going to happen is whoever the owner of the house is, let's say, for instance, I'm going to give you two examples. First example is you buy the house sub 2 and then you're going to rent it. So you're actually the owner of the property. The way that you're going to run your insurance is your name. Your name is going to be as the insured, the named insured. Then the seller's name is going to be the also insured or the additional insured. It depends on what insurance company you're using as to what they call it, also or additional. And then you've got a mortgagee clause, and that's going to be Wells Fargo or Bank of America, whoever the mortgage is held with. That's as simple as that. Now, if your plan is to buy the house subject to and then subsequently sell it to an owner financed buyer, okay, so maybe your payment over here is $800 a month, but you're going to sell it to somebody at $1,100 a month with a 10% down payment. That would be an owner finance sale. This is called a wraparound mortgage. You're selling it for more than you're having to pay on a monthly basis. If you're doing that, this person becomes the owner of the property, right? You've taken ownership subject to. the debt you're paying to Wells Fargo, but you own the house. And then you're going to sell it to somebody. They're going to owe you a mortgage. You're still paying Wells Fargo over here, but they're going to owe you money, and they become the owner of the property. We're passing that ownership through. If that occurs, the way that insurance needs to look is that, again, the owner of the property is the named insured. So this person is the named insured, the person that's actually in the property. And then the also or the additional insured is going to be, again, your seller. Your name is not going to show up there. It's going to be the owner as the named, the seller as the also or additional insured. Then you're going to have the primary mortgagee. And I want you guys to make special notes of this because this is how you've got to do it. You're going to have the primary mortgagee, and that's going to be Wells Fargo. And then, like I said, they owe you money, right? They owe your company. Your buyer owes your company a mortgage. So you have a mortgage with them, but you are a secondary mortgagee. So the insurance will have named insured, also insured, primary mortgagee, and secondary mortgagee. Those four people have to be on that insurance policy in order to keep your bank happy.
Right.
And that's how insurance is going to have to look for you.
Yeah, guys, I think we should put someone else on here that knows what they're talking about with Subject 2. You can see why he's one of the nation's leading experts on the subject. That's amazing that he just explained it like that. So what are your thoughts on this? So, obviously, with interest rates low, they have no reason to call it due. I mean, as they're getting the payments, they want the payments. But let's say 5 years from now, interest rates go to 8%. Mm-hmm. Do people that have these houses they took over and they wrapped them or they rented out, do you think that banks are going to start calling this money back in so they can re-lend it out? Or
yeah, it's a really good question, and I'm glad you're bringing this up. And you'll throw that out at me, but guys, I'm going to throw this right back to Connor. Is the fact that you're listening to a real expert in his industry. The fact that he knows all of these questions to ask, and this isn't even his primary method of investing, is very telling of who he is and what he's done to get into this business to put information in front of you guys. So let's not skip over that. I'm not trying to blow smoke too far up your rear here, but I think it's really easy for newer investors to not fully understand, oh, look, he's interviewing somebody who really knows, but also to understand, wow, this guy actually has to know his crap pretty well to even know what questions to ask the interviewee. So thank you for bringing that up. But the interest rates going up in the future, we don't have a crystal ball, right? So I can't speak to the future because I don't know what the laws are going to look like. I don't know what the lending landscape is going to look like. I can't tell you with 100% certainty, but I think that that's part of my motto, my drive as an educator, my drive as an investor to be ethical is that I'm never going to say, oh, yeah, sure, don't worry about it. Just do this with me and everything's going to be just fine, right? Like we need to be very aware of what is and isn't the truth. And we can only promise what we can promise. And I say the same spiel in front of my sellers because if something like that comes up in front of my sellers, I need them to understand I'm not convincing them to do something that has 100% certainty to it. What I do have is 30 years of experience to looking backwards with 15,000, houses put through that has gone through several cycles. I mean, you look at the early 90s, people were happy to get an interest rate of 13% at that point in time, right? So we've seen cycles go up and down with this method. And during even those high cycled periods, the due on sale clauses aren't getting called anymore historically. Again, I can't change that for the future, but historically speaking, we're seeing that that's not being called. And the joke that I always kind of crack when we're talking about this is I start talking about like, if these banks wanted real estate, they'd be called Coldwell Banker. They wouldn't be called Bank of America, right? They want money. They want their payments. They want their interest. As long as they're getting their payments and their interest and their money, that's what they planned on. They planned on getting that money. They didn't plan on getting that real estate back. And if they did, our little friends Dodd and Frank would have something fun to say about that, right? So they've got to plan on their asset performing. And why would they call a performing asset in that situation? Because, and I'll end up with this, and I know I'm getting long-winded about it, but it's important to know if a house goes to foreclosure from a bank, well, the government backs their loans, right? The government, we've got those FHA loans, and we've got Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. Banks actually get dinged, and I can't remember. I'm blanking on the number right now. I think it's 8. It might be 10 times the amount of whatever foreclosures they took for that year. They get dinged on their ability to be backed by that amount times something for that next upcoming lending year. So if they take this property back, they're actually hurting themselves. If it was a $100,000 property, they might not be able to get $800,000 worth of lending in that next year from Fannie or Freddie because they're showing irresponsibility in their lending practices by the fact that they're having to foreclose on people. So they don't want to take the property back just as much as we don't want them to take the property back.
Right. So are there any banks that cause more difficulties doing this than others, or are they all basically the same when you?
Basically, what it boils down to is if you get one of the big boys, one of the big banks, you're prime. You don't really have to worry about it. The times that we've seen it get called more often is going to be on the smaller banks. And like we had a round of like 5 houses get called on the due on sale clause from, and not my personal properties, but that I've heard of, from Colonial Savings getting purchased like, 4 or 5 years ago, right? The bank got bought by somebody else who came in, ran through everything and said, you know what, actually, let's take these back. They had a different strategy going on that, right? So still to this day, I'm a little bit wary whenever we see Colonial come up on a house that we might be looking sub to. But if you see Wells Fargo, you see Bank of America, you're going to be fine. It's, they're such a beast. They're running so hard that they're not going to be worried about this one asset being out there.